used to make the trunk of the race car that we used, even the 3D piece. What we did to do this is, however, took the trunk and just over the top. Once that was done, we peeled it off, flipped it over, did the same thing on the bottom, and bonded the two pieces together. So, yes, it's a little bit bigger, but it's really simple to make pieces as long as you're not looking for a piece that is, super show grade. But we're all here, putting the car off track at times and banging together. So if it's much lighter, it is much better for me. So with the trunk, I did the doors, the hood, the fenders, pretty much everything on the front of my 1965 Mustang, and we lost 240 pounds. So it can be quite light. All right, now, before we get too far behind, let's get started. So step one would be PVA. Now, because it takes 15 minutes to dry, I've done that part. So this part here in the center is already PVA'd for our use. So the next thing that we are gonna do.
Real quick, can I just explain? So literally we just pour a little bit on and then wipe it around like we just use an Andy's rewards card, because I don't know why, but wipe it around, make it all even layer, make sure everything's covered, step back, let it haze up and dry.
Yep.
That's all I did.
So it just takes about 15 minutes for it to dry.
Was it the same thing you lay over the trunk of the car?
Yep. So it's everything we've done that we're going to show you today is the same, except for on the trunk and the 3D pieces, we use Super 77 after the mold release to just help form it to the right shape. No, not as long as you have enough PVA, it pulls right off. Yep. So we're going to go ahead and then, Jessica, you want to come help mix while I talk about it? So this is the cheapest epoxy that you can get. It is absolutely a simple grade, and like you can see, it works and will be your entry level. Now on your sheet we have another piece that we use, and it is much more expensive, but it is also a motorsports grade one. So when we do something like our hood that has to stay in one shape at 170 miles an hour like we did at Road America, we use a very expensive stuff for that. However, for other things like our fenders and such and our trunk, this is exact material that we used. So what we're going to do is mix up an amount 1 to 1, and just so I don't have to mix up a second time,
What do you want to do?
let's go ahead and mix up like how are you doing here?
Why is that messy?
Yeah, I get that.
Okay.
So when you
So
said
how
like
much do you want?
2K or 7K or whatever, is that like thread count or?
Nope, it's thickness too. So if you're looking over here, this is a 12K. And so what it is it is 4 times as thick as the 3K.
Okay.
And so when we use that twice, it's 8 times as thick as one sheet of material is. What we're gonna do today is we're just gonna show you how to layer up a couple pieces of 3K.
I'm sorry, and your first name is?
Jeremy.
Jeremy.
Yep.
Is epoxy resin usable?
Yep, this is epoxy resin. You don't want anything else.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So it's really it's similar to fiberglass, but different.
No, absolutely same process as fiberglass. The materials are just a little bit different.
And what is the range on the various different products as far as thickness, from low to high?
Yep, so from low to high, your average ones that you're gonna find would be 3, 6, 9, and 12K.
Okay.
And so this is roughly your thickest, and this one here, if you wanna come look at it, pass around, is super thin, but it also forms very easily. So when we use for our trunk, we will go ahead and use a bunch of layers of this to form it. Whereas if we were going to do a big, thick flat sheet, like for wing uprights or something, we'd use a few layers of our 12K.
Thanks.
And then if you want a fancy, color or top layer, it's the same exact materials and process to use. It's just a different shape that you get to see. So the first thing that we're gonna do for our actual epoxy is we're gonna do a flood coat, and we're gonna coat the piece where we had our PVA put on. So what we've done here is we've just done a 1-to-1 mixture, because that is the ratio of this type of epoxy. So 5 ounces and 5 ounces, and then we're gonna mix it together for a minute. And once that's ready, we will just pour it on. And I'm just gonna take a spatula, move that around, get it into the right spot, and then we'll put our first layer down.
What's the working time on that epoxy?
So all of them have a little bit different of a time. I like to use slow cure ones because it just gives me a longer working time. Typically you got a good hour on a slow cure. There's fast cure ones, which your working time is like 10 or 15 minutes. That's used on a lot of like infusion types. I would not get a fast cure when you're doing it by hand. That's gonna really kill your time. On the back end though, like the slow cure stuff that we use, if we're not heating it, curing it, it takes a couple of days to cure, but process would be the same, and it gives us a little bit of a less stress when you're working on it, I guess you could say. So we're gonna
Use heat, does that just change the cure time, or does that also change the strength?
Nope, change your cure time is really the biggest thing. What your strength is going to be made up of would be what you use for your epoxy, and like an infusion with a vacuum bag is gonna be your best. Or like when we do that piece right here, these are 2 different pieces. This one is hand layup and this one is a vacuum bag. And you can just see that the outer edges here are a little bit softer. And the outer edges on this one are nice and like firm to it, and it gives it just a hair more strength. So our epoxy is on for our flood coat. And the reason that we're doing this when we are making a flat sheet like this is we are then going to get a nice even application and that nice shine in less holes for our facing coat. Because when we're doing this, this is the coat that this is the layer that everybody's gonna see. So if you're using a fancy carbon fiber, you're gonna wanna put it down first. So like when we made the splitter over here, the green went down first. So what we're doing is just trying to get it nice and layered even and take all the space out. And so there's no holes for it to be. The bigger the piece you make, the more difficult that becomes, because then you have to get it layered really, really evenly. And even I've been doing this for a couple years now, you can see that there's a couple of vacancies in the new splitter that I just made. So it's not impossible to still make a mistake. However, perfectly usable. Alright, now that we have that down, we're going to take our first layer. Simple as can be. Set it down where we want, and then we're going to use a roller. Now this is a specific carbon fiber roller. It is a simple tool that you can even buy just on Amazon. And we're going to roll it into the carbon itself. And what we're doing is pushing it down into that first layer, so that way you can work up into the carbon itself. And the epoxy coming up through is exactly what we want.
And a little technical stuff, learning from doing it wrong. He starts in the middle just to make sure that we don't then roll all the way forward, and you're gonna pull that back, and then all of a sudden you've moved off of your PVA area and out of your wet laid bottom. So just kind of really start slow with that first layer so we don't move things around.
Yeah, we also start in the middle. It kind of takes the chance away of making a wrinkle. If you wrinkle the first layer, chances of getting it out are a little bit less without disturbing what the carbon fiber face looks like.
How much pressure are you using?
On the first layer, not a bunch. you're really just kind of pushing it down a little bit into it. Once we get to the next couple layers and we really want to push it down into the epoxy of the next one, is when we really start to apply some pressure. And on the ends, when we are going across, if we were to this end where we're going this way, I rolled this way. We're getting to this end, I rolled this direction. That way you don't pull it back onto itself. So when you see the application is nice and wet through, first layer is done.
So is it worse to get not enough epoxy versus too much,
Yes.
basically?
Yeah, you don't want, on a wet layup, you don't want not enough. Because it really kills the strength of your piece. You're definitely going to be a little bit heavier, but the strength will be in the piece. So, second layer, same thing. Just going to lay up. Start in the center.
So I guess one thing you can do with fiberglass is make little squares like that and then glue them together. Is that basically the same for?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So when we make the trunk, it's bonded together in two pieces, and then we just use an automotive bond to actually bond it. So second layer, I'm starting to apply a bit more pressure to really try to get it to come up through both layers. And this is for a couple reasons. One, you really don't want any space between the two. And for the second piece, you want to try to use just enough epoxy, so that way your part isn't any heavier than it needs to be.
That you could just add some more on top of.
Yep, yeah, if you need to, you can add some more. And so what I'm doing is making sure that the last layer is going to be a little thin to begin with, and then we'll pour more on top and show you that you can just add if need be.
Yep, on that big one, we had to add.
Yep.
He's like, are you pushing hard enough? I
Yeah.
said, yes, I am. Try.
Yeah. So it'll get dry.
How many layers is this big piece?
That's 3, just like this one.
Do you do anything with the bias to change the way it flexes or anything?
Yep, you can. On a piece when we make like the material that we have there for like an air dam, it's not as necessary. You know, we're using a bit of a aluminum backing piece behind it, or like on that, when I get it to the shape I want, I will make a template and then we'll make a carbon like angle for it. But yes, we definitely do on the bigger pieces. So like on the trunk, when we have 3 layers there, there are different directions to add strength in both ways. Alright, second coat. It's pretty good. Now, this process will be the same thing, pretty simple. However, on the last one, we're going to be a little bit dry. I can already tell just based off of what the first 2 layers look like. We're adding some more.
And this is just a demo piece, but when you are doing it, just make sure you're free of any loose strands of carbon fiber, especially on that first bottom one, because there's nothing more irritating than you go to pull it off after it's cured 3 or 4 days later and you see a loose strand of carbon fiber just laying there and you're like, that's gonna stay there.
You want to come pour some more on this? And I'll show them exactly what you're talking about. So to demonstrate what she was talking about, I can show you that when I laid up my nice giant green splitter here, you can see that from the other, somehow I got one strand of rogue black carbon fiber underneath it somehow. And then there's a tiny spot here, which I couldn't care less about, right? But this is meant to be 5-inch splitter, so that's gonna be on show for everybody the whole time. We're gonna fix that with a sticker.
Can you just use a sandpaper polisher type thing?
No, you'd have to go way into it.
Okay.
Super far down. Okay, so we are a little dry. We put some more on and just squeegee it out, just like we did with the first layer of our flood coat.
And this way, if you're like, oh, I got too much, you can also just squeegee it right up onto the glass.
Yep. So, if you come and look where it is quite thick at the top, that's going to make your part quite a bit heavier. And so what you're kind of looking for is this. This right here is enough to be nice and strong, but it isn't overly saturated. And so we're going to do just what she had said. And we're going to go ahead and take our squeegee and squeegee just some of our extra resin that we put on there just off to the edge, and just let that cure with the rest of it. And then go ahead and roll in our last one.
Is glass strong enough to use for vacuum bag process?
Absolutely. Yep. You do want a thicker piece, for sure. But yeah, just about any one will work. The only reason we use a thicker piece is because we start adding weight to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the splitter that we made weighs about 10 or 12 pounds. So you definitely want a little bit thicker. We use roughly, it's probably a little less than 1/4 inch thick. And it doesn't have to be a piece of glass. Like, does anybody know what signboard look like?
Mm-hmm.
You know, just a piece of ACP. As long as you have a big flat table like this, you can put a piece of ACP down in the side that's the polished side. You can go ahead and use that. We've done that before.
Is glass easier to clean, basically?
Yeah. So during glass use, a lot of times you don't even need PVA and it'll pull right off. And it really makes making a flat piece like this nice and simple, because you can cheat and go,
Did I do it?
yeah, okay, that looks nice and good.
So if you're putting a core in,
Mm-hmm.
you would let something like this cure and then put the,
Nope. So Jesse, you want to grab me the core and our other piece of this regular? Yep. Thank you. So,
that's just another layer, basically.
yep. So what we would do is take our core, place it wherever you're going to want to place it. Just put it in the middle for this one. And then we're going to go ahead and take our next layer, set it down, center it to where we want it to be at. And then comes the slightly more difficult part with it, is trying to get it to, on a wet layup like this, if you're not going to vacuum bag it, it's going to be difficult to get a super, super crisp corner. But if you really start to work it into the corners, you can get close. Like the two different pieces that I showed you. The one is a wet layup one. Yep, knew that was gonna happen.
How do you get resin back into the carbon where the core is?
Where the core is, we're gonna pour more in.
One more.
Yep. And so then,
Do you want the core saturated or?
it doesn't have to be super saturated.
It's not like we're trying to fill all of those
Yep.
little honeycombs.
Nope, you just want it to be, have enough for it to take itself and make it, adhere to the other two pieces.
Is that a case where you might wanna saturate the overlay piece before you set it down on the core, or?
You could, yep, but that just, it can then, oh, you mean this piece here?
Yeah,
Like
the
the-
piece that you just put over
Yep.
the top, if you had a.
Pre-saturate it?
Do a preload on it and then lay it down over the top.
You could, that would make a mess, but you could, if you wanted to. Really, if you've got enough epoxy in your other two layers, or three, however many you got, it's not super necessary.
How hard is it to work with the vacuum bag? From your experience? Did you get it the first try?
No,
Okay.
no. In order to learn the vacuum bagging process, which unfortunately we're not gonna show you today, is it takes a while to set it, all the materials up, and it adds a lot of cost. You know, a vacuum pull machine can cost quite a bit. Now, we
Just
also.
use a food saver.
You could, and we have seen some people make an attempt and use it okay.
With decent results.
Yeah,
We haven't used that.
no, we haven't done that. But, now that you're saturated again, you're just gonna go ahead and try to work it down into the corners. Until you have your shape.
Are there different rollers?
There are different sizes, different thicknesses, and we have one that we use specifically for this, which is just one thin one that pushes it down into the corners. But on a wet layup like this, it's gonna pop back up some, so it's not really gonna be a necessary need. And when I am using a core material like that, the heavier the epoxy around it is, the more of the correct shape you're gonna keep. So I do tend to make it a little bit thicker when I'm doing that. And then you're just going to, on a wet layup, do what I call a little bit of babysitting if you have a core material. And that is allowing some time to go by and coming back and getting that crease back into your corner. And then just allowing it to cure. So
when babysitting, how much, I mean, obviously it depends on if you have a slow cure, fast cure, that type of stuff. Before you go and try to push it in, are you looking for anything to say, I missed my time frame?
And to add on that, when do you not wanna touch it?
So once it is tacky, like if you go and touch it and you can actually feel that it's not super wet anymore, that's time when whatever you have is it. You're done. Right now, if you really want to come and get super close, I can.
Is it hot?
Huh?
Is it?
No, it's not hot. It's
Okay.
not. But what I was trying to show is that you can really see the difference between the pieces when you come and get close. And here, this is a little bit thicker. This is about 5 millimeter core, and there. That is about as good as you're going to be able to get without doing a vacuum bagging on it. So this one is a vacuum bag, and you can tell that the edge of it is much better. Now, vacuum bagging on a piece like this is a little bit simpler than, say, a trunk inside for sure, or that. That trunk, however, no vacuum bagging on it. All it was is a simple wet lay and let it dry.
Is it just a learn by experience, or are there recommendations for how much border you want on things?
Yep, so the more of a border you add to, especially to a core material, you're gonna add some expense and material usage, but it lays better around the edges, because then it keeps it soaked and saturated in the space that you want it to be at.
Are there different thicknesses of core material?
Yes, yep. So
What are those ranges?
the range of thicknesses that you're gonna have go from this one that we use, which is about 1 to 2-ish millimeters, and the average that most people would use, this one's about 5. However, you can get it all the way up to 1, 2 to 3 inches, however big you want. They'll sell it to you.
So
Yeah.
as an example, then a core material at 1 inch could be, you
Mhm.
could do that
Yeah.
instead of using foam.
You could, but you would absolutely not get the right results that you're wanting from this core material as you would with that foam piece of core material for that type of application.
Just because of this shaping.
Yes, just because of the shaping and the way that that would weigh probably 70 pounds to gain as much of a resin attachment as you need to hold that
Okay,
shape.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. Not a resin goes on there, it's gonna add a lot of weight.
Yeah.
So is there a specific foam? It's not like you go to Home Depot and buy the whatever home insulation foam,
Yep.
the blue or white or red
Yep,
or
so you
whatever.
can. So you can buy a very expensive core material, which they make. Or I will give you my business cards, which you have here, which will have a link to all the YouTube channel we use, which shows a process of us shaping. This is 1 inch just foam material that you get from Home Depot is inside of this, because it will cost you about $20 for a 4x8 sheet, and the core material for this thick of the pro material that you would use is probably like $1,000.
I don't know if the chemicals in the epoxy would affect the foam or
Nope.
bond
So
to it or.
there are times that you will, over a few years, you'll start to see a little bit of delamination that happens with this sort of material. But we have gotten to the point of where when we are using a like a 1 inch foam home, board material, we will sand the top of it just enough to get it to not have that nice smooth, like shiny texture to it.
Open the pores up to it.
Yep,
then.
just open it up enough to where it will attach better.
Okay.
Yeah. So with this process of a wet layup, we've made this trunk, every piece we've made for the Mustang that we run, wings, anything that you can think of, we've made.
How would you go about cutting one of those carbon fiber pieces?
Cutting it,
Mhm.
like this carbon fiber piece or that once it's done.
Both.
Okay, so the cut is made with the same thing, really, just in a little bit different size. All we use is a cutting blade on our, side angle cutter. So
Okay.
So you don't just use 10 snips for the.
no,
thin
you would
pieces?
actually fracture that into pieces. Yeah, you need
Okay.
something that actually cuts it.
So you're talking about like an air grinder or something
Mhm.
like that?
Yep.
With a cutoff wheel?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Diamond blade is best, but really any wheel will cut it. A diamond blade will create just less fractures and such thrown into the air. Cuts it a little smoother.
What about the thickness of the blade itself? Will running a thinner blade help in situations versus a thicker one?
Not really. We've tried a bunch of thicknesses and none of them have really made a giant difference on how it cuts. It's really just how much material you're taking away.
Is this, is there a UV rating in any of these
Yes.
epoxies?
So the epoxy that we have here has a UV rating. It isn't as long as like your Pro
The more expensive.
epoxy one would be. Yes, it does have a UV rating. Thankfully, none of our stuff sits outside for a giant long time. At least none of the stuff that we've made with this. But yes, there is a huge difference in UV rating between something that's very expensive epoxy and general use epoxy. And the reason we're using this one today is just to show you that you can do it for not as
Not
much as
super
DIY.
it really costs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And like when you're on there, specifically if you're looking for that UV rating, marine grade is a
Mhm.
great thing to look for.
Yep.
Just gonna add a little bit of cost, but yeah.
Does like auto paint stick?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you could paint the top.
Yeah, so when we finish pieces up, there are some pieces that we will have sent out and just clear coated with an auto clear, and it helps. I can assure you that over time it will get through the clear and still haze it up a bit, but yeah. For our pieces, we like to make them as cheap as possible because there's a good chance they're going to hit the ground at some point in time. So
Wall or whatever.
yeah.
The
No
corner
walls.
loader's gonna radio in and say
Yeah.
65, blah, 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 has parts.
We've definitely left some side skirts and such sitting on the track before, that's for sure, especially at Ozarks.
So I guess that's the downside of carbon fiber is it shatters and leaves sharp shards. Is that,
You could,
have you run into a,
but we haven't run into that.
That-
Nope, so what it will do is typically just shave it down. So like on the,
Diffuser.
on the diffuser at Ozarks, we rebuild the bottom like 3 inches of the diffuser every time because it just shaves it straight off, especially on like the roller coaster. Has everybody been to Ozarks or know what it looks like at least? Right? So it's really huge compression zones at a relatively high rate of speed. And so on my car, I can just hear it and smell carbon being shaved off.
but it just rubs it off, it doesn't shatter it?
Nope, typically not.
Okay, cool.
You can. If you impact something hard
Like,
enough.
I'm sure if you hit a wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like on a compression?
Yep, nope, it just shaves.
Okay.
And we use a certain set of mounts for most of this stuff where it has a little bit of deflection in it. And that way it takes that initial hit up and goes away a little bit and then just
Well, I guess,
shaves it up.
speaking of mounts,
Mhm.
you said you like put aluminum pieces
Yeah,
in
so
between the,
when we're doing a splitter, there is inset aluminum in this area here and here for our two main mounts that we use, and then there is a square out here that we will use for like our splitter connection rods. Same thing on the other side, and then there's one in here which we will then go brace up to the body for the outside because this one is not done yet. We literally just made it, rough cut it to bring to show. But we have two large splitter diffusers that will go in here and then get bonded in and carbon fiber back out.
So is the aluminum top or bottom, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. We generally make it to where it's just about the thickness of the foam. We leave a little bit, like typically like a 1/4 of an inch. That way it stays in the same spot. It doesn't just fall through when you're epoxying it in. But yeah, roughly the full length. So with this 1-inch board, it's just under 3/4 of an inch thick, and then we left about a 1/4 of an inch of a pocket to hold it there.
When this here's done, would you grab the carbon fiber, or do you go after the PVA edge?
To peel it up, I can show you.
Like radio rate?
No, no.
Oh no, this one's not, but I'll show you this one. So, let's say that this is, a piece of glass that we're using, right? And so we have, we'll use a business card to just kind of show you. But we have another, plastic material that's just a trim piece, and we just get under the edge of the epoxy, and as soon as you get under the edge of the epoxy, then you just go, and it peels right off.
On a flat like
On a flat sheet.
Yeah.
If
once
you're doing a
you're starting to
3-dimensional
shape
piece,
and-
it becomes difficult at times.
Like
Well,
that
but
trunk.
since the PVA
Yeah.
is water solvent, you can also like try to work it in, and then you're squirting water up there to help release that.
Yep. So, I'll show you kind of what she's talking about. When we did the trunk, there is, especially on the inside 3-dimensional piece, there's a lot of areas for it to grab two different things. And so we literally were able to get a piece back peeled up, and then I just took a spray bottle and sprayed water in it, and then slowly it will go, and then you can just peel off a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Yeah, I like to use PVA, it's water soluble. There's a lot of people that will use a wax, but it is a little bit less easy to just use and see where you've put it at. I like the PVA. Other questions?
Excellent.
Awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit of a checkup on our piece here. So it's actually staying into quite good of a range. But when we're checking, if you have a core material, when we're checking it, what we do is, I do about every 15 to 20 minutes or so. And then after you've gone about an hour, it's gonna be tack it up and you're not gonna be able to do anything. Now, if you see all the bubbles that are doing that, that is definitely something that happens, especially on a wet layup. What we have at the shop is just a torch. We just do a little bit of a heat and bubbles flash and go away. They didn't allow me
Use
to
a torch
bring.
instead of a heat gun?
Yep, we use a torch instead of a heat gun because it just instantly goes away, where the heat gun it isn't as hot. Pop the bubbles. You can use a heat gun, it just takes a little bit longer. I like open flames. Any other questions?
If you're doing the vacuum, you don't have to worry about the bubbles because they're all
Correct.
going to be pressured out.
Yep, it will bring pressure.
And you, when I do fiberglass, I usually use like acetone to clean my hands and stuff like
Mhm.
that.
Yep.
I noticed you didn't have acetone around or something.
Nope. So a lot of times what we'll do is if I get my hands sticky doing this, I'll go immediately to the sink. Soap and water takes the majority of it away.
Grit,
Yep.
if you need it.
Yep. I have just a hand wash rag there too. But yeah, I enjoy working. So I used to do a lot of work with fiberglass as well. Fiberglass is itchy. The material smells. It's incredibly hot. Carbon fiber doesn't do any of that as much. So if you look at some of the materials, and I think I just used the one that had it. Yeah, we buy the carbon fiber panels that have a fiberglass tracer in it to give us that ease of keeping a shape or a straight line if we want to. And so that little piece of carbon fiber, if you play with it enough, it will have a little bit of itchiness to it because it has a piece of fiberglass in it. But other than that, you could sleep in the other carbon fiber and not have to worry about it. So that's the reason I love it so much. I don't go home itching at the end of the day if I'm using carbon fiber for 5 or 6 hours. Yes, if you have a sheet, go ahead and grab one. If you would like to take a business card, if you have any questions, or anything like that, call us at the shop, and we'd be happy to help.
Where's the
answer your
shop?
questions. We are located off I-35 and 95th Street in Lenexa.
And I haven't worked with fiberglass like you have, but like, these little suckers are sharp.
Yep, be very careful,
They will get
depending
you.
on how much you're using. It gets very sharp and once it gets stiff, so.
Really? Where'd you go to?
Yeah, if you,
And Jeremy's really good about creating these, just like this on YouTube, so if you're wondering hey, what did he do with that splitter, it's on YouTube, so.
Yep, Dead Dream Motorsports on YouTube. We have almost every piece that we made for the Mustang last year is on there. The splitter will be on there. The video's not quite completely edited just yet, but yeah.
An interesting story about composites. I was watching the McLaren documentary, and McLaren was the first Formula One car that used composite materials. I don't know if it was anywhere or a monocoque or whatever, but and the reason they did it is one of their engineers, his full-time job was working on the Concorde. He was an aerospace engineer, and he transferred some of the knowledge of working with composite materials on the Concorde to Formula One, basically.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Thank you, good job.
Red lightness.
No.
If it works in the air, it'll work on the ground.